right now. We've got the Fargo Forum, correct, is in-house here at the depot. We've got Jody, Carolyn, Kevin, and myself, Dave Flinker, here at the depot. Carolyn will be kind of taking charge of producing the facilities committee meeting. So our first item is for our facility committee commissioners to review the proposal from Fargo-Moorhead Community Theater on reconstruction of their damaged roof over the wintertime, and then proposed expansion. So we've included several documents with our facility committee packet. And as if you read in the memo and then some of the provided history of FM, and I'll just start off, Eloise, and I'll let you take over. But we also have Rob with JLG and then Tony with MBN Engineering on board with Eloise from Fargo-Moorhead Community Theater. So over the winter time, they did have some snow load damage to their main roof system over their theater and had to do some emergency shoring just to keep it from collapsing. So they've been closed for the winter season. As part of their reconstruction efforts, they are looking to rebuild their roof and then also do an expansion that has been proposed a couple times. I believe back in 1980, correct me, oh, I got it right here, 1984 and then again 1994. The expansion request, and as part of that expansion request, there would be the need for additional property to the west side of the Fargo-Moorhead Community Theater. And this was proposed back in 1984 and 1994 to the Fargo Park Board, which was approved through a motion in minutes, but was never amended the agreement to reflect those motions. And the construction never did take place. So I guess what we're coming here today, and Eloise can take over from here, is they would like to propose to the Fargo Park Board, would the Park Board allow them to, amend their agreement and encroach more into Island Park, which is on the west side of their building. And this new addition would be about 11,000 square feet of park space. And the addition to the building would be significantly less, but they would require another 11,000 square feet of additional land to the west of their building. So maybe I'll just turn it over to Eloise right now, and she can give a more thorough background on, the history of FMCT, some of the documents that have been attached and handed out in the packet. And I'll just turn it over to Eloise right now.
Well, first of all, just thank you for having us here today. I appreciate that. As Dave just told you, the roof obviously needs to be repaired so that we can use it at any time. When this happened, our board got together and they really saw this as an opportunity to enhance this theater. It's a 52-year-old building that is well worn, I'll put it that way. And we were already looking at ways to improve it and make it a little bit better before this happened. So we're just taking that a little step further. Of course, once we get into that theater, we want to improve the lighting and the sound for people. We want to create that educational wing on the east side of the building because right now we are renting additional space and we really like being all together in one space. We would also have to create new administrative space. And then, of course, our ask, and this is where we bump out more into the park, is to build this black box theater. We would use this for rehearsal space, community rentals, small theater productions, that type of thing. And as our board has talked about this, we really want to bring the essence of the park into the building. So we would have a lot of glass so we can see out into the park and make the park a part of the building rather than this just chunk of a building sitting on park land. And here's an example of how we have witnessed growth over the past 4 years. So people coming to our shows. We've increased the number of shows, and we've seen 140% increase in the number of people coming to the theater. You know, we use community events, have community events, 1 Million Cups, RDO, other general events. We've seen an 80% increase in those events. And of course, our children's theater programming, we've seen a 71% increase in that. So there's really a need for more space in that theater. Interestingly enough, when this building was damaged, I had community members coming to me and saying, oh, please don't tear it down. Don't move. Please stay in the park. And then we said, yes, we're going to stay in the park. And then they were so happy. I was really kind of amazed that this building holds so much historic meaning to them. But it is a community theater, and the parks are based for the community. So I think there's a good connection there. I even had 1 Million Cups contact me and say, how can we help? Because as you know, 1 Million Cups comes to us on a regular basis, and they want to be back. So I really see this as us working with the community and you working with the community. And I hope together we can remain great neighbors and get that bit of land to make everything grow and to make our community better. And I'm just going to turn this over to Rob so that he can go through some of these diagrams. He can explain them much better than I can. So Rob, why don't you take over and talk about this?
Thanks, Eloise. Thank you, Dave, staff, and board members. I think the diagram, which is moving around a little bit on the screen here, but what you're looking at here is an existing site survey that was recently completed in alignment with the lease terms that we were able to find and utilize to kind of make sure we had a good base map and understanding of what the current property line, current building, and then the color diagram that was on the sheet prior to this is really sort of a highlight. It's, again, this is an initial master plan, and really this is the first critical step in the process, was to have this conversation, be able to have enough accurate background information to then have the conversation with you all to be able to understand if there is the opportunity to expand this, and if so, then what programmatic elements would go there so that we could move forward into pre-development meetings with the city and the appropriate next steps. So as you're seeing in this diagram, and Eloise referenced, the building addition to the east is classroom additions. The gray block is the existing building. The lighter or more bright yellow is building additions that would more or less fit in the property, the existing property boundaries, which is highlighted with the thick red dashed line that's going around. Then that darker tone of kind of the gray, it's a gray over a yellow, is really the encroachment area. So you can see that there's about 3,345 square feet. Again, this is just schematic and estimated, but that's what's right now programmed and planned that really encroaches. To be honest, the box on the south side is the black box theater. The other space to the north of that could be worked into the existing property lines and programmed, so we'd be able to work that in if there was concern about the amount of property. And the blue area is just representing approximately 11,000 square feet of land, and that's just a representation of what had been approved in the past and what the extent of that could look like as an addition to that property. So that is not necessarily the agreed upon, or it doesn't have to be the requested amount of land. It could be a different amount to be able to fulfill the program goals. We just squared it off and showed what that previous amount would kind of look like as a visual example. So if there are questions about the, more specifically about the plan or the addition ideas, we're happy to be able to walk through those. Also open to questions at any time.
Rob, Dave Leaker here. Basically, that blue area is approximately 45 additional. If you went from the current property line to a new property line, it's about 45 additional feet to the west.
Correct.
Okay.
Hi, Rob. This is Stacy Griggs. I have a couple of questions on the look. Are you going to keep the same look for the community theater, or are you changing that?
Eloise, I'll let you answer that, at least to start with.
We are definitely changing the look of it. The pavilion, the Bergam Pavilion will remain the same, but the front side of the building, again, will have much more glass involved with it, so we can see out and people can see in. And the same way that we're talking about with the black box and the office space up on the corner. The whole building will actually have a different finish on it when we're done. So it's really to upgrade the building so that I think the term that we have used is we want it to look artistic. We want it to look like artistically, like there's something going on there.
Okay. My other question is the timeline. What kind of timeline are you looking at for starting this project and finishing?
Eloise, I can jump in here. Right now, we're looking at sort of a two-phase approach, understanding the need to expedite, or the goal to expedite the process of having the re-roof of where the snow issues were, where the structural issues were, with the goal of having that sealed back up prior to Thanksgiving and the winter seasons. Right now, the Fargo-Moorhead Community Theater is working on the selection of a construction manager to kind of assist in the process and the procurement of that, knowing that it's going to be a multi-phase project from a construction standpoint, really meaning at least two bid packages going out to make sure that they can get structural steel ordered and make the structural improvements and re-roof and have the building enclosed, the theater volume enclosed as quickly as possible. So right now, the schedule is more or less as quickly as everyone can go, with the goal of being enclosed and then finishing up the interior construction over the winter season to be open as soon in the next summer season as possible, with everything full force. Of course, that's going to be contingent on some fundraising process that FMCT is going through. So that's, again, will be part of the discussion moving forward. But we knew the first step was this discussion. And this is really sort of the kickoff to schematic design for the project, which will be pretty quick because it isn't a huge building and isn't a huge addition by any means.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Rob, this is Vicki Dawson.
Go ahead, Vicki.
I'm wondering if we know, and maybe this is a park question, how many trees are going to be impacted by this?
We've done some initial analysis and think that there might be 3 trees impacted, but we really need to go look at the kind of periphery construction constraints too of building the facility. So there could be 3 trees, 3 to 5 trees impacted. Eloise, I don't know if you have a different kind of number than that, but I know that's what we've talked about, and obviously would like to keep that to absolutely as minimal as possible.
And Vicki, that's one thing we want to confirm with our forester, but just because maybe the building footprint doesn't encroach on the actual trunk of the tree, we need to make sure that we keep any construction out of the root zones from adjacent trees, because that's
Sure.
what you want to stay out of so you don't compact the soils. And then there's also a hillside there that would have to, get laid back with a retaining wall. So I don't know how much extra disturbance that would cause. But that's just something we could consider if the commissioners wanted us to look into it. Rob, I got one quick question. Is the repair of the existing roof contingent on this addition or this encroachment being granted, or is that, are they 2 separate issues? They can go ahead and start construction on this roof, or do they kind of work together if the new addition goes on?
I think the answer to that, Dave, is really, as you, I think, understand well, is it kind of comes into a fundraising question. I think the roof repair, and Eloise, please feel free to add more information here. The roof repair is going to happen no matter what, and our intent for that is to move that process forward and be able to put out a bid package to be able to have that roof replaced, structurally sound, get the shoring out of it as quickly as possible, and have the existing facility back in working order. Obviously, there's efficiencies in construction, both cost and time, and by being able to fulfill more of their goals. with that encroachment being one of them, and it ties into the fundraising too and their approach for their fundraising message. But no, the roof will happen and needs to happen, and the goal is for that to happen as quickly as possible. Eloise, do you have any more you'd like to add to that?
Well, the other piece of this that really needs to happen quickly is on the east side of the building. We had some mold issues there, so it's really not usable. So that's going to happen also very quickly.
I have a couple more questions. This is Vicky. What do you expect the sidewall height of that new addition to be? Specifically where the theater is?
I believe that's in the 25. Right now we anticipate that to be in the 25-foot range.
Okay, 25 feet above grade.
Above grade, yeah, and as Dave mentioned, there's a hillside there to contend with, and Tony is on the phone, so this would be one of the first things that we would do moving forward if there was general approval to the concept, would be to study the grading and then to develop a section through that to be able to confirm grading elevations and roof elevations on that. We have, over the last couple of weeks, we've been diving in and have constructed an existing building model and drawings of the existing building. So we'll be able to show and could present more accurate sidewall and section profile heights as it relates to the land here, even within a week. So we could follow up with confirmation of that. The key for the black box is just creating enough volume for them to be able to hold the level of performances and the flexibility. Ideally, what you'd like to be able to do is have enough clearance above to be able to have a catwalk system for lighting and to be able to use that space. So just enough volume to be able to do that. Of course, cost is always a consideration on a project like this, so we'll be working on kind of the balance of that.
Sure. So that kind of rolls right into my last question, which was, is there a way we can get a rendition of what this building will look like on the west side? So the view from Island Park, if there's a way to get a rendition or sketch or drawing of what you expect that to look like, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. We can absolutely, and we'll be developing that in the next few weeks. The hope is for that south, as Eloise mentioned, that south box, the corner that sort of juts out into the trees into the hillside. As Dave mentioned, that'll need to be built out of into the hill, and the intent is for that to be a glassy sidewall on that corner, looking out into the park. With then curtains that are drawn around the perimeter of that. That's what currently is proposed and being explored from a budget standpoint to create the actual blackout for the black box. Then the idea of sort of the notch between the south encroachment in the north would be to have actually access to the park and almost a small lobby space that gathers between that. And then the north is the administration offices, as Eloise mentioned. And if you scroll down on this PDF, you can see a floor plan as well. But that would be the administrative offices would be relocated from, they're currently on the east side of the building where the classroom addition is. Yeah, so here the orientation is just due to the sheet size. So now you're looking at, so if you're to the right is north. So to the west, you can see that black box, and you can see that the hope would be, as Eloise mentioned, for that to all be glass along that north side looking into the park. So that office administration space would be processes with a lot of glass looking out into the park, and then kind of a collaborative open workstation. So really the idea is to pull light and to pull visibility through the building now, which I think would be pretty incredible for the space.
One last thing, Rob. I'm sorry. I think I probably already said one last thing, but I always have another one last thing.
I'm enjoying this.
So you've got that west lobby. And maybe this is an Eloise question. Do you envision putting a patio out there, having people gather out there? I'm assuming it's not necessarily an entrance to come to the theater. They typically come through the front door, but is it something that you kind of, along with that event space where you may be renting that open area outside next to that black box in the west lobby?
It is scheduled right now to have patio space in there and be landscaped and go run into the Park District paths that are along that north side. So yes, I don't know. We haven't talked about renting out the outdoors. I think it's just kind of more of a gathering spot. If you've been to Million Cups, they love to stay afterwards and talk, and that would be another place for organizations just like Million Cups to kind of meet afterwards, especially in the summer months.
Yep. Thank you.
Eloise and Rob, Dave here again. Hey, I know you guys have probably gone through this plenty of times and way back since 84 and 94 about that addition going to the west. Just with the number of trees in the hillside on the west side, have you guys, as I said, you probably already thought about this, but can you put that black box addition to the south anywhere where there's fewer trees and maybe less of a hillside?
Oh, there's more of a hillside on the south side.
There's more trees or more hillside, or?
There's more hillside.
Okay. I just didn't know if that was an option or a thought.
Dave, I think you could look at locating. I mean, I was looking at it again over the last few days. Technically speaking, you maybe could even put it on the east side, but it wouldn't fulfill some of the other programmatic goals and sort of the building circulation. The goal with the location that it's at right now is to tie in and to maintain that sort of main concourse, their sort of main circulation space that, you know, how you access the theater right now, you go from the lobby pavilion space into the corridor that then spills into the theater volume itself. The idea there is to really continue that space is something that's been underutilized, underprogrammed due to it just kind of goes to a dead end. And the idea has been if the black box is at the other end and that west lobby and that connection, now all of a sudden there's this east-west really valuable community space that can be used for all kinds of different supporting gatherings and socializing and getting people to move and collaborate and between the two, and even allows the flexibility of an event happening in both space or an organization being able to utilize both spaces at the same time. So if we move it to a different location, it would cause more remodel and addition and infrastructure than at its current location.
Okay, just curious about the reasoning.
Yep.
This is Jerry Rosted. I need to jump in. I got a few things. First of all, I've always loved to go to the theater. It's a great location. It's a great partnership between the Park District and the arts community. So that's great. One of the things that I was wondering about is this is directed towards Dave, I think, more than the FMCT group. But has the staff taken a look at this and kind of reviewed it? And have you come up with any pros and cons, any concerns, anything there at all? I guess what I'm suggesting is I'd like to see this Park District staff take a look at this and come back with here's what we think kind of thing before we proceed. I think it would be important for them to staff it. And I don't know if you've done that, Dave, or not.
No, we haven't looked at it in depth, Jerry. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we want Sam Demmer, our forester, and Dave Beats to look at the impacts to the park on the west side. And as I mentioned before, it's one thing to move a tree out of a footprint of a building, but then you also got to consider the drip lines, the root zones, and how exposing that hillside affects those trees. But that's one thing we'd look at. And then we have looked pretty thoroughly into, the expansion into the park. And we have gone into this in the past, and we've had our legal services look at it. We would need to update the agreement and make sure that's, fits this encroachment into the park. And, then again, it's always, the public optics of using park space for another entity. And I know theater and arts is part of recreation, and that's great, but it's just one thing you'd have to pass the public eye test of taking up some additional park space. While it's not that much, that's just one thing we need to consider. So It's not that it can't be done, not that it's a great cause, it's just, one thing we need to look at.
Yeah. Well, and overall and just in general, I'd be favorable to this project, but I would certainly want the Park District staff to go through it and come back with their recommendation to make sure that we're in sync with the Park District and the FMCT. One of the other questions I was just wondering, is the view to the west is obviously more conducive than the view to the east. You got the park looking west, you got the 4th Street looking east, and yet we're moving the office space over to the west. Does the footprint change for the office space, or have you thought, would it have been better to have the classroom space over there, or how did you come about that decision making?
I think
Go ahead, Eloise.
I think for the theater itself, it made sense to put the classroom space over there. It kind of separates it out. We were able to increase the footage there. It just seemed to, having those children in there and working with them, that seemed to be the best place in the building to put that. And that's currently where the offices are. So then we need to relocate the offices. So that's how the offices got up in the corner.
Some neat ideas that have been talked about along that facade running along the street too are ways that you can increase visibility of some of the community activities. So actually bring transparency and life to that facade, which right now is, is pretty dated, but to actually be able to show all the activity, and by having those classrooms along that facade will show some of the activity that you just can't see in the theater volume. The theater volume itself is, needs to be contained by large walls that they can control the light, but that classroom space is a space that offers a lot of flexibility and transparency. So one thing Eloise and FMCT had said is one of their goals is to show how thriving the environment is and all the different activities that are always going on, because people just don't see it right now, partially because they are split between different locations. Also, it helps control, instead of having people moving throughout the whole building, it'll help control access from those classrooms, and then just kind of to the restrooms and not going throughout the entire building was something that was discussed.
Is there a story behind calling it the black box? What's the background of that? I'm just curious.
I don't know that I can answer that. Black boxes are known for portable seating. So you can have theater in the round, theater like a thrust with on 3 sides. It's just a very flexible space. You can also take that seating out and use it for different things. And I think it's called a black box. It's actually, normally they're all painted black with lights up above. Everything on the floor is movable, changeable.
So that's kind of a common terminology in the theater world, black box?
Yes,
Okay.
It is.
I didn't know that. So, and then the only other question that I had is, with the coronavirus and all that, do you have your fundraising in hand, or do you anticipate any changes with your fundraising capabilities because of what we're going through?
Well, I have to say that remains to be seen, but we have gotten such positive response from the community, corporate and individual, that we feel really positive about it. This is something that the community wants sitting there, and they seem to understand that they need to help. They all need to help make this happen.
Okay. Well, like I said, I always enjoyed going to the theater, so
Good.
I think the project is a good endeavor. I just want to make sure we dot all our I's and cross all our T's as well.
And just about fundraising, we're going to be working with Dakota Medical Foundation. They are going to work with the board on how to really do the best job of fundraising. So they're going to be keeping an eye on it, on what we're doing too.
Rob, this is Vicki again. On the picture that has the colored stripes showing the additions, the gold on it, I can see the measurements that go to the west onto the park property, but I'm just curious, and I could print this out and measure and do the scale deal. But I'm curious what the distances are to the right, towards the east that you're going, and how much space there is between, say, the back of, what would that be, the back of your stage to the, you know, where you'd be able to build. If you made that a true rectangle or instead of it jutting in.
So you're looking at to the south, to the edge of the blue line. So sort of from the red property line to the blue line. Is that what you're looking at?
No,
Vicky?
I'm looking at from the existing building, the
Yep.
southeast corner of the existing building
Okay. Yep.
to the east.
Oh, so from that location to the property line is approximately 68, 69 square feet, or I mean feet, and the addition itself is looking at it. That's a shop addition right there, is about 20 feet of expansion to the east.
And then how wide, how deep is that, or wide is that? The other dimension, north to south.
North south. North to south, that is approximately 40 feet.
Okay.
35, 40 feet is that. So if you were to take that, if you were to call that lower rectangle, that gold, if you were to make that a rectangle, that'd be about 20 by 35 foot shop addition. Right now, that's where their scene shop is, and they come in and out. So they'd be looking at just minimal expansion to that as part of the project as well.
Sure. So you're adding the shop, you're adding a shop and taking the existing offices and turning them into classrooms through growth. Is that what's going on the east side?
That's exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
So are there any other questions for Eloise, Rob, or Tony? And I guess I would just I'd just like to add, you know, FMCT has been a great partner over the years, and they offer a great event space, as Eloise mentioned, with 1 million cups and other corporate programs in there. So, I mean, it's a great space. I know theater and arts, as I mentioned before, it is a recreational activity. So that's some of the things we just need to consider if we do move forward, and we can check on some of those impacts to the west with our forester and our parks director. And if we got any other questions the commissioners would like answered, we can work on that. Question for Rob or Eloise: is there a date you need a response back for whether the commissioners would grant this easement / encroachment, or can you kind of proceed with what you're looking at for the roof, or how much time are we looking at? I know Stacy touched on the schedule earlier, but.
Eloise, my opinion would be the sooner the better, Dave. I think the key for us right now, we understand that there's going to need to be some back and forth between FMCT, the park district, as well as the city and legal representation to amend the lease and to adjust property lines and to record it appropriately. One thing we would like to do immediately is start meeting with the city of Fargo through pre-development meetings and talking about the impacts and the appropriate planning for that. That meeting is actually being scheduled right now. Of course, from an efficiency standpoint, we would love to be able to include this dialogue of the full goal at that time and make sure that all of our I's and T's are crossed, dotted and crossed. I think we can continue to do that for a couple weeks and say, hey, we are working with the park district to confirm that this is the correct direction to move forward with, and work under that if that feels like the appropriate thing. But I would say within a month's time, we'll be looking to close out schematic design, and before moving forward into further documentation and into the construction document for bidding phase, it would be great to have at least some sort of written approval that this is in motion and it's going through the legal process, et cetera, to be documented and recorded appropriately, if that makes sense.
And
Yeah.
The other thing for us is it's difficult to fundraise when you say, well, we think we might have this, but we're not sure if we're going to have this. So that's a problem that I keep running into is we can talk about the education program, we can talk about the theater, and then we kind of have to put a hold on it because we don't know about that black box area yet. And that's an important part of showing the full picture of what we're doing and why funds are needed.
So are you looking for a go, no-go decision at our May 12th commission meeting, or is June 9th too late?
Well, I would say it this way. May 12th would be appreciated, but I work with a board and committees. I do understand how this all works. So the June date, if that's what it needs to be, that's what it needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
What's the possibility of having the kind of that schematic or that sketch drawing that Vicki talked about that would be a view from the park so we could kind of see what it would look like? Is that possible to have that before the May meeting, or?
Yes, hearing that as a priority to be able to understand kind of the exterior architecture of that, we'll move that up as a priority in our process and make sure we can get you visualizations of that concept.
And then from a park district review standpoint, Dave, is that May timeline workable? Is that pushing pretty hard, or where are you at with that?
Oh, I think that's very doable. I mean, we can get our forestry department over there ASAP and kind of look at that and talk with some of our directors and get their thoughts. Yeah, that's no issue for us. I just didn't know what kind of, questions the commissioners would have. And, this is only, a committee meeting, not a board meeting. And is that enough time in 2 weeks to come to a conclusion?
This is Vicki again. While you have the foresters and whoever else you think needs to be out there to evaluate the space they may go to the west, at the same time, I think it might be beneficial to see, what the north and south look like. Just because I hate for you to run into a blockade on the west side and say, well, can't go that way. And then we aren't prepared for the next possible place for them to go. So, Eloise, I think this is great, and I hear what you're saying about the public and the fundraising and how they always want to see what it is. We kind of have the same thing going on with the sports complex. So I appreciate your struggles with trying to show somebody something that you can't put your finger on. But this is a great community place. It's used by a lot of people, and it'd be nice to have something wonderful you can show off.
Thank you.
All right, with no further questions, I appreciate Eloise, Rob, and Tony for joining us on this virtual meeting. So thank you once again.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, moving on, our next item.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Thank you. Next item is, has been on our facility committee meetings and commission meetings several times, is the request from Verizon to locate a cell tower in North Fargo. And they, over the years, they've been looking at trying to find a proper site to locate this cell tower. I know they've had some antennas on some City of Fargo water towers that will be being replaced, so they need to find a new location for a tower up around North High. They've come to us previously about locating a cell tower on the northeast corner, kind of in the corner between the Coliseum main building and the lobby. And through some of our discussion in the past, it just was not a good location. I think there's been, youth that while they're watching their brothers or sisters or brothers probably play in the ball field to the north, they play some pickup games in that corner. So we've been working with Verizon to look for a secondary location, and I don't know if everybody can see this on the screen. In that northwest corner, look at that, it's kind of between the northwest corner of the building and the alley. And just to the right of that is our new chiller that was installed with the Coliseum renovation. We've met with Dave Beats and Jason Spitzner, our facility manager up there, along with Verizon and Verizon's engineers, and they feel this is a good location for their tower and cabinets. And actually the tower, well, I guess it'd be the same on the northeast corner. It is hidden pretty well by the 30 or 40 feet of the building. And then it's even closer to the light poles of the baseball field. So if you look at any of those renderings that are attached from the previous mock-ups, they haven't done one for this area, but you kind of get the idea of what it's going to look like with all the additional lights out there. It really helps camouflage the tower. I think the tower is 125 feet tall. And the light poles on the ball fields are 80. So if you look at some of those renderings, that'll give you an idea. And I think this is a good location for them to access. It's kind of backing out of the way. And I guess from Park District staff-wise, feel this is a good location for the tower and their cabinets. We've talked about kind of the terms of the agreement, and we've gone back and forth several times. The last one we talked about, which I think we've got a pretty good understanding on both sides, would be five-year terms, $1,500 a month rent, 2% annual increase. You know, and we have talked with Verizon about going to that 3%, and they just feel that the board nowadays will not go to that 3% escalator. And then with a 29 by 24 foot lease area. I think if you go to one more picture, Carolyn, that might be prior. Oh, there you go. There you can see the cell tower. That's a good spot right there. And that actually shows the cell tower on that northeast corner, but it would almost be in exactly the same spot, maybe just slightly to the right a little bit, but that's kind of what it would look like. So right now, I think we've got a pretty good location for that tower. And depending on the commissioner's feelings, with that last kind of set of terms, I think we're pretty close. So I'd open that up for any discussion.
This is Vicky. I think this is a huge win. I think the thought that went into this and the efforts you guys put in to find a different place for it when we talked about little kids playing in that only grassy area there is, I think this is, I couldn't be more pleased with how this is turning out.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. The location where the renderings that you sent out look like it's the old spot. It looks like the towers are on the northeast side originally. So, but where you're explaining it, it's kind of like in the back, in the the mechanical area of the building where you expect that kind of stuff to be.
Yeah, the renderings are from the previous one on that northeast corner. We just didn't want to have to remock those up. But if you look at the picture that Carolyn's showing up right now, right now the pole disappears behind the building, but with this new location, it would basically be right there, and the pole would be in front of that north side. So that's a pretty good representation right there.
Just a technical question, Vicki and Stacy, is the picture flashing for you? It's flashing for me.
Yep, it's flashing.
Okay.
Yes.
That is.
I want to make sure it catches your eye.
I pulled
I
it up
do have
on my
the
iPad.
PDF up, so I can look at that, but.
I just figured Carolyn was getting fancy and it was part of the flashy show.
I'm trying to get all features.
She wants us all to have vertigo by the end of the day. I think
I have it up on my iPad, then I don't have to look at the screen quite so often to have my eyes burn.
I don't suspect it's flashing on your end, is it, Carolyn?
Yes, it is. It has to do with the Wi-Fi, I believe, at this time, because we're having technical difficulties with the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
I'm good with this new plan. We've gone back to the same footprint that they wanted in the very beginning, and we get $500 a month more plus their standard 2% multiplier, so, or increase. So I'm good with this.
All right.
That was the one question that I was going to ask is, do we want to go back and ask for 3% and say it's approved at 3%, or do we Or are we gonna just take 2.5?
I mean, I guess my thoughts are, and this is me personally, if you look at 1%, you know, an additional 1% escalator of $1,500, I mean, I'm not a great mathematician, is that $15 a year? I mean, is that correct? 1% of $1,500? I used to be good at
Yeah,
math.
that would be right. Where's Tyson?
So it's $15 a year, I mean, I think we've
Well, it's
got.
18,000 a year. It would be the lease agreement at 1,500 a month. So 2% of $1,800, that would be $360.
Oh, 15 a month, yeah. So 15 times 12. $180?
That's 18 grand. And then 2% of that would be,
Yeah, it's $180 a year.
Right.
Yeah, $180 a year.
I thought it's 2%.
Well,
No, the difference between the 2% and the 3%.
it's 1%.
So the difference if we go to try and get 3% is $180 more for the first year, and then obviously it keeps going up.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, they've gone from 1,200 to 1,500, which is, I mean, they've gone up significantly per month. So
Those my Verizon bill.
Yeah. But, you know, and they've rejected the additional escalator every time.
Exactly.
The monthly rent and the space, the footprint have changed with each iteration, but the escalator always stays at 2%. So I think, I mean, we could try, but I think it's just pushing the can down the road, and we either say no forever or we take this, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the bigger piece for us was location and the impact on anything else we have going on. And this is tucked away nicely, and we're getting more than we were in the first place. And like Stacy said, we've tried and tried, and they're stuck at the 2%. I think, yeah, we'd just be spinning our wheels.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you.
And I just asked the question. I'm not, I wasn't being rock solid. And just wanted to get an opinion.
It's a good question. I just feel like we've been talking about this saga for a long time.
Yeah, it's defining our group. Okay, I'm good.
With no other questions, we'll move it on for consideration at the May Commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for continuing to move with this, because cell phone coverage is important to everyone, especially on the north side.
Especially now.
And I can't agree more with Vicky's statement. The moving it to where the new location is a real win.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right, the next item up is a request from the city of Fargo to construct a new flood protection levee on the north side of our north softball complex. And I will turn this one over to Dave Beats if he's on the line.
I am. Thanks, Dave. Good morning, commissioners. Yeah, this one is basically the city has come to us and asked us to amend our lease agreement with them for the property where we have our north side softball complex. The reason they're asking us to amend this is they've identified the location on the very northern edge of our property there that we lease with them as being an important spot for their overall north side flood mitigation risk projects. So basically what they'd like to do is take a section of the very northern edge of the property and create a levee along there that runs all the way from 81 essentially, or University, all the way to the east to the lagoons, and basically encroach on the area that they had originally said we could utilize as our park space. We've worked with the city engineering department and planning folks and come up with a plan what we think will help us accomplish both things, which is the first one to allow them to put the levee there and amend our lease in that way. The second one is to still allow us to utilize the space for athletic fields. We just laid out softball again, even though we don't know that softball will indeed be in that location. But we thought that that would be the one that would have the most limiting factors as far as the distancing of the fences and things like that. So we had them lay out an additional fast pitch pod, which is to the northeast on the flashing picture, and a slow pitch pod, which is in the northwest corner of that. And there's room with the levee alignment to create both of those. Now, as I mentioned, we may not put softball there. If softball, doesn't continue to grow, we've talked about, all kinds of things from lacrosse to football fields to additional soccer fields. We feel we still have the adequate space and allow this important piece for the city to add into their flood protection. Basically, there's 3 big elements, and those are listed on the information that went out to you guys. The first one is there'd be an installation of a gate well structure on the northeast corner. This would allow floodwaters to not enter into our complex, as well as allow drainage to exit from our complex as it does now. Additionally, the levee was designed and would be constructed so that it is south of the lift station that's currently there for the complex, so that would not be impacted. And that parking lot that you see kind of in the middle of the picture, we'd still have access if and when that parking lot gets developed by means of a road that's up and over the levee. They actually own the property, so we have the agreement with them to utilize it as park space. So basically that's what we're asking, is for the consideration to allow them to amend our lease, which would then basically cut out that very northern portion where the levee would go. Right now, the city attorney is working on language in the event that will go forward. Their hopes are that we can get this kind of figured out before our next board meeting, but if not, if they can't get all the legalese worked out and then we have our legal team review it, it may get pushed back. But anyway, I think that's the gist of it. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.
Dave, is there any meaning to that rectangle in the northeast corner of that drawing?
Yeah, basically that's a remaining dirt pile that was there that we had pushed up from the construction of the complex thus far. Our goal is that we would keep that for any sort of fill that we would need to build whatever we have in the future in that area.
Okay. Do you see any negatives to this? I mean, to me, it looks like it's going to change the view and we're going to have a little bit of a levee, but gee whiz, we got a levee at Lindenwood Park that really takes away the view from 4th Street. We deal with it.
Yeah, I don't see any negatives, Jerry. I do see, I'm grateful they worked with us to be able to kind of align it the way it was. We did kind of change their alignment a little bit. The positives I do see are that, it helps us protect the whole complex as a whole. And once development does take place on the north side of 64th Avenue there, we are going to have some sort of a residential protection buffer, it's called. So this levee is actually going to help us meet those requirements, in the future whenever that parcel on the north gets developed.
Thank you, Dave.
Does anybody else have any questions, concerns?
No. I think if it helps us keep the property dry the way we need it to is a good plan.
Yep.
That's also a good plan. Yep. All right.
Okay, well, we'll work with the city attorney and hopefully get something back later this week or early next week. And if we do, then we'll bring it to the May meeting. If not, we may end up coming back at May facilities with kind of what the final agreement would look like, and then we'd have the opportunity at the June meeting.
Sounds good.
Yep. Sounds
Thank
good.
you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that kind of wraps up our 3 agenda items. I do not have anything for other. Does any one of our commissioners have any other questions, concerns?
Yeah, if you would, talk about, reopening and where things are at and what you can tell us in terms of coming back online here. The May 1st is day after tomorrow, and it sounds like things are going to start opening back up.
Yeah, and I won't get into the weeds too much. Carolyn's sitting right here and can touch on it much better than I, but yeah, we are, we sent out that kind of newsletter that Kelly and Carolyn and marketing put together for our Courts Plus members, and they are busy working on kind of operating protocols for Courts Plus. And I think the big thing is we're going to try to coordinate with the local fitness clubs in town, the Y and Wellness, and then along with other fitness clubs around the state. So that's about as much as I want to try to screw up, so I'll turn it over to Carolyn.
As Dave mentioned, we are meeting today, doing some additional work. Again, wanting to make sure we have the proper PPE, the supplies on the shelf, the processes in place, going through Bergen's requirements, and also just some of the helpful tools that are on that website, and making sure we've answered things to the best of our ability. We're looking at more the middle of the month right now, sometime around the 11th to the 15th. Again, we also have staffing that we need to discuss because so many of our staff are college students and are maybe not here in town and have, again, protocols we have to follow for them to come back to town. So that's what we're working on right now. And as Dave said, we are working across the state with other recreation, fitness, and facilities, as well as the local Y and wellness centers.
Carolyn, do you expect to open on Friday?
No, as I mentioned, we will not open any earlier than the 11th to the 15th unless we can get everything in place.
And that's similar discussions with the Y and Family Wellness, correct?
Correct.
Other park districts around the state.
Yep. We sent out that e-blast to all of the members, and it's on our blog, and it is going out on Facebook to say, no, we will not be opening May 1st.
And it's similar to, we want to open up and make sure we're prepared for everything. Carolyn mentioned that just the supplies and the PPE. I mean, we'd hate to open up and then find out we're out of sanitizer, we can't get it, or masks or something like that. So we want to make sure we're prepared and everything goes smoothly. I think we've done a good job with our, Carolyn and our golf staff have done a great job with the courses, and we want this to be just as smooth.
Has that been good practice? Having the golf courses open, you can limit touch so much with golf courses because it's an outdoor activity, but do you feel like it's a good just beta test on other facilities?
Definitely has been helpful. What we learned about cleaning carts we're using with the bike rentals. What we've been learning about sanitizing balls and timing with the different pieces of play, as well as the spacing on the driving ranges, have all been helpful again for other departments. So yes, I would say that just like anything, it's nice to walk before you run.
Right. And has it been well received by the public? Are you getting any pushback? Are you getting any suggestions? How's that going?
We always get suggestions. And then there's always folks that feel it's too soon. And then there's other folks that feel like we're taking it too seriously and we should be relaxing things faster. So again, we're balancing between that. Some of the things with carts, we will be looking at more so because of turf issues, not so much because of sanitation, because we figured out the push carts and we figured out the balls in the driving range. But again, we want to walk before we run. It's much easier to open the gates slowly than to take the horses back in.
Exactly.
Yep. And that's, at least in higher education, we're having the same approach. How can we do this methodically and smartly, not quickly? So smart is better than quick. So I think that your approach is great, and to open when we're ready, not because we can be open.
I think I have no concerns about people thinking we're taking this too seriously. I think we are considered the leaders in the community, and they look to organizations and other outfits and businesses to see, hey, what are they doing? Oh, gosh, they're doing this, that, and the other thing. Maybe this is a big deal. So I think while they maybe grumble about it, we may even be educating people along the way that, gosh, if they're not if they're willing to take the extra time or they have to do all this extra work to keep things clean, maybe this is really a big deal. And I think it rubs off on the community in some respect too.
Yep, and just an FYI, and as the different phases open up in these coming weeks, you know, we'll look at that for opening up other facilities, the depot, the campground will be opening up here May 1st. But as you know, Commissioner Deutsch mentioned earlier, we are any other agency or user group that uses our facilities, we're asking for kind of a list of operating protocols of how they're gonna operate their programs coming out, and we're reviewing them. So, you know, if you see some of those that are operating on our park land, they do need to follow the state guidelines, and we'll review them just to make sure we don't see any red flags too. So.
Are you getting any guidelines from the National Association? Are they helpful? Do they have helpful webinars or any kind of support that way?
Yeah, I mean, there's webinars from North Dakota League of Cities, Association of Counties, National Recreation and Park Association, North Dakota Recreation and Park Association. They all have those virtual webinars that are roundtables that talk about anything from parks to fitness centers to administration to budgeting. I mean, there's all that information out there, and they're all, you know, useful in their certain way.
Okay, and we've been taking advantage of that, or have we found any that have been more useful than others?
I mean, we actually have two of our staff that are heading up roundtables. Sam.
Larson Frobig.
I always get that.
Frobig
Larson. Sam Frobig, Larson Frobig.
Yes.
Is running the campground one, and Dave Beats is running the park operations one. So.
Okay. So, without it being a long explanation, are there some basic things that we're requiring of campers?
At this point, we're asking them to stay within their campsite and not socialize, you know, and bring their chair over to the next campsite. We're asking them to stay within the guidelines of, if you're going to use the restroom, that is only a family group that's in there, or single users. We're asking them to use cards for security purpose to get into the restrooms and not have to open. So again, basic things, and of course, letting them know, all right, now the playground is closed, the shelters are closed, and, you know, please respect what we have asked of the public as well as.
And what does it look like as far as reservations for the next 10 days?
I'll have to find out. It's very light. It's been more traveling nurses that are interested in having the ability to have a campsite. Because again, most folks, if they're coming from farther away, right now, what would have been graduations and would have been the marathon and special events, they've all been canceled. So
sure.
And we're not opening the lower campground because of the water and needing to dry out and plant grass and all of those kinds of things.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question. There was something I had read, someone had asked you about soccer practice and renting for soccer practices, and I don't know if it also included games, but where are we at with outside groups using our facilities or parks for their activities that may or may not be within the guidelines, the CDC guidelines?
Right now, we're just working with the groups to gather their kind of operating protocols and procedures of how they're going to operate. Our facilities are still currently closed until whether they open up team events in phase 2 or whenever that comes about. But right now, we're not taking any confirmed reservations for any of our facilities.
So that includes the whatever group wanted to do soccer, which I assume would be outside.
That is correct.
Any additional questions?
I'm good for now, thank you.
Yeah.
You guys have done just a yeoman's effort here over these past couple of months. It's in these uncertain times to look at what you guys have done and how you've stayed on top of it is, it's great.
Well, Carolyn's getting pretty good at being a producer, so.
I like it. I'm in a t-shirt and shorts.
All right, thanks, everybody.